Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and today I'm coming to you with part 4 of what I think is a 5-part series on the top 25 guns from my collection, or my favorite guns from my collection. Often people ask me, Jason, what are the top 5 most expensive or best guns of your collection? And I can't narrow it down because I have so many that I love and cherish. So I thought I would do it by category and give a top 5 of top 5s. My first video was on my favorite piston-driven rifles that I own. My second one was on my favorite CCW or carry pistols. My last video was on my retro clone rifle builds, and today we're going to my rare and discontinued firearms and the top 5 of those that interest me the most. And today we're going to start off with what I think is a relatively rare pistol here in the United States, but in Europe it might not be. This is an HK P8A1. Now, when I purchased this was one of only 100 in the country. Now, it's my understanding that B&T USA has imported a few more of these, but this is the sidearm of the German Armed Forces. And yes, it does look like an HK USP. Essentially, it is. But one of the big differences is the safety. Now, normally on a USP, if you have a variant 1, you would take the safety selector switch and put it up for safe, down for fire, and if you take the lever and put it all the way down, it would decock the gun. But as you can see, those markings are just a little bit different. It's the exact opposite. For some reason, the German military wanted them in that configuration. Now, there was a pistol called the P8, which looked very similar to this. However, they had problems with the slides and the pressures of 9mm cracking those slides. So the difference between the P8 and the P8A1 had to do with them beefing up some internal components of the gun to make it run NATO spec 9mm a little bit more effective. And as I said, I don't know how many of them are in the country now because B&T USA has imported a few, but my guess would say there's probably less than 500 out there as I speak and film this video. The next pistol I want to show you is one that some people are going to know about, but it's actually the first victim of Glock. Now, back in the early 80s, the Austrian military had a contest to replace their aging P38 Walther pistols. And of course, the Glock won. And that took the Glock name and the Glock company to stardom. And you know they are one of the most dominant forces in firearms today. However, this gun was the runner-up, and many people thought this was actually the gun that was going to beat them. This is a Steyr GB. Yeah, the GB stands for gas brake, essentially. Of course, the German word is a little bit different, but GB can be gas brake here in the US. This is a gas-operated gun. Really, it's a gas-delayed blowback gun, to be more specific. In fact, it taps off the gas in the barrel, and it slows the slide down from reciprocating, kind of like a P7, but it doesn't have a piston. One of the other interesting things about this firearm is that it has a double-stack, double-feed magazine, where of course most modern pistols use a single-feed magazine, and the frame is made from stamped sheet metal. So I know that's not going to come across on camera, but when you hold this frame, you realize this thing is not milled from a solid piece of metal. It was designed to be effective and cheap to manufacture, but also very durable. There are a few polymer parts on it, like the trigger guard, obviously the grips for it. This gun was also copied by a company called Rogak, and sometimes those are known as being some of the worst pistols ever developed because they're kind of dangerous to shoot, but collectors seem to like them for some reason. And so a lot of people say this is the first victim of Glock. The other thing that's really interesting about this pistol is that it is one of the rare ones in the US in the military style. Now, when you find a Styer GB, you are going to pay a lot of money for it, especially the magazines. Those magazines are about $300 a piece. But most of them have a very textured finish to them. In fact, it kind of looks like a rhino lining from a pickup truck. However, this one is Parkerized, and this was the military version. And only a handful of them came into the US in this finish. I believe only 1,000 and a handful came in total. And of that, only a couple of hundred were in this finish. So I have the military finish. The only thing I don't have to complete this package is the box. The person I bought this from was ex-military, and they bought it in a gun store new because they wanted a gun for personal protection, and unfortunately they didn't keep the box. So I keep hoping someday on Gunbroker or one of those auction sites I'll just see the box for it. I would love to find that to complete the collection. Staying in the vein of Germany, we're now going to go to one of the most iconic semi-automatic pistols ever. This is an HK P7. Now this particular one is actually marked from the Lower Saxony Police, so this one was in police service. I have all the markings right there. It's in excellent condition. It's one of the European PSP versions, so we do have a heel magazine release. It does not have many of the American features, which would have the magazine release up here. I do own an M8 and a M13, but this one is just cool because it is like the originals that came out in the 1970s. And I picked this up because it was in such good condition and it had that Lower Saxony police marking on it. And the person I bought this from, and actually all of my P7s from, is a local P7 collector. In fact, he has one amazing collection. He has a ton of these. It was just his obsession. And I actually was able to get a few away out of his collection because he was saving up for a very rare P7. In fact, one that was used in the military trials here in the US in the 1980s when the M9 was selected as the new service pistol. And I think he was trying to save up $14,000 or $15,000 for that. So I actually got these for a good price, and I'm glad I got them when I did because it was really just before the price of these went sky high. So any P7 today, they're really expensive and they're very difficult to maintain because none of the parts are made anymore. So if you have a P7, you really do want to take care of it. And I just like this one because it was in service with the German police and it's in the original European PSP type of configuration. The next gun we're going to take a look at, I think everybody knows what it is from the silhouette alone, or if you've seen a Chuck Norris movie. This is, of course, an Uzi. Now, no, this is not a full auto Uzi. This is actually an Uzi Model B. So it started off as a 16-inch barreled carbine, and IMI brought these into the country in the early 80s. It is semi-automatic only, and they had a Model A and a Model B. And one of the myths of the Model A is that it was easier to be converted to full auto, and that is completely a misnomer. The biggest differences between the Model A and the Model B, even though the Model A is more rare, the B is more expensive because it has features that people like. The front sight is more true to the original Uzis, and it actually has a better firing pin safety block in it that was redesigned. And that was the main thing. A few of the Model A's would fire out of battery and they were dangerous. And so they had to remake them into the Model B. Now, when I did SBR this, I decided to go with a threaded barrel. In fact, my engraving, my SBR engraving is on the barrel on the bottom. One day I do plan on buying a non-threaded barrel so it would be exactly like the original Uzis. And I'll just have to get my engraving done on that one as well. But I think the threaded barrel looks okay. If I ever wanted to run this thing with a suppressor, and I love the fact it has that original folding stock. Of course, if you love Chuck Norris movies or know about the Secret Service, back in the 1980s, they used to carry these as well. Just a really, really cool, I guess some people say pistol, but pistol caliber carbine or submachine gun if you had one in full auto. And in case you were ever wondering if you saw an Uzi, how to tell a full auto from a semi-auto, it's very easy. If you can see the side of the bolt, if you see this little valley in the bolt right here, it is semi-auto because there's a block in the receiver which this goes around. A full auto Uzi will not have that. So there were some dealer post samples of people that took these and turned them into machine guns. Of course, they did that legally, and you will occasionally see them with that type of a bolt, but that was the main difference visually. So if you ever see one at a gun show or a gun store, you can always tell full auto from semi-auto based on that. So this is my Uzi Model B. And then last, yeah, you guys see it over here, I have an HK91. Now this one was imported in 1981 and chambered in .308, and this is the civilian version of the G3 rifle that was, of course, used by the German military. This particular version does have the front bipod, not all do. There's a couple of rare variants that have the bipod in the back of the handguard. This gun, as far as I know, has only had 5 rounds shot through it, and it was not me. I bought this from somebody that claimed they were the original owner and had only put 5 rounds through it. Now, the condition of the internals seem to indicate that is the case. However, back in the early 1990s, he put on a clip-on shell deflector, and it actually scratched up the receiver pretty bad. And of course, back then it wasn't a big deal because you could still pretty much afford these and you could get them at gun stores. Now today the prices on these have gone up because this is a roller locking HK legacy firearm. And I didn't like that. Everything else about this gun was really perfect. In fact, I think the only other thing that bothered me was the front sight here was bent a little bit. So inevitably, I sent it off to somebody at the time that was nationally known for working on guns like this. His name was Jason Cotter of Investment Grade Firearms. And it turns out that was probably a mistake. And in fact, he actually did really good work on this gun. He refinished it in the original gray. This is not in black. Many of the clones have a black finish, but HK applied a very dark gray finish. He even put on the grenade lug for me, so it makes it look more like a G3. I really do like that. And he was able to finish this without hurting any of the markings and get rid of all those scratches on top of the receiver. But it took him forever. In fact, Jason, a little story, you guys can go and look it up, got in trouble because he kept holding on to people's guns for so long. There were people that sent him very expensive HK firearms and he held on to them for 2 or 3 years. And eventually, I guess, his personal life degraded and he got arrested by the ATF for essentially stealing people's guns and not returning them. So that was an interesting story, and I'm sure glad that I was able to get my HK91 back from him before all of that stuff went down. So that is the top 5 rare or discontinued firearms from my personal collection that I think are just really neat and interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of HKs in here, and if you're an HK collector, hopefully you appreciate those. So I'll be back with one more top 5 in a future week of the most sentimental guns to me. And I think you guys might know some of the guns on that list because you've been following my channel for some time. But if you have any questions about these guns or like these guns, let me know in the comment section below. So, as always, thanks for watching.